listening to Our Two Satoshis podcast with hosts Justin and Billy from CryptoBiz.com.
On this week's episode of Our Two Satoshis, I sat down with Frederico, the CEO of Kleros, to discuss their upcoming and possibly the world's first interactive ICO to really find out what Kleros is all about. This interview is chock full of information on how Kleros is trying to solve disputes between two parties with the blockchain. And definitely make sure you listen to the whole thing because Frederico explains what it's like to be the CEO of a startup, what his role involves, and gives us his pick on a book that every entrepreneur out there should read. I'll be flying solo this week because Billy actually had a family emergency to attend to. So everybody out there, please join me in wishing Billy all the best with this emergency. And hopefully he'll be back next week. So here's the interview. Check it out here. Hope you enjoy. Frederico, CEO from Kleros that we have on our podcast today. Thank you for joining. Can you kind of just, for our listeners that are out there that haven't, read up on Kleros or heard much about Kleros, can you just kind of give us a brief overview of what Kleros is and what it intends to do with the blockchain?
Sure. So Kleros is born in a time when we have the economy, the global economy has been going through lots of changes, right? Connected to globalization, digitization of the economy. So now you have many types of disputes that basically cannot be solved by the existing arbitration or dispute resolution mechanisms. For example, so I live in Buenos Aires, and imagine I want to hire some guy, some web developer from, I guess, Guatemala to build a website for me, right? So
Okay.
These kind of transactions are becoming very common because of the gig economy and people working as a freelancer from everywhere, right? Collaborating in a global scale. So I do an agreement with this guy, and he agrees to do the website for me. We agree on a price, and then he delivers the product, and I'm not happy with that. So what do I do? Like, I'm not going to Guatemala to go to court against him or sue him like for a $500 website, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are not really solutions for this. So how can blockchain help, and how can Kleros more specifically help? Imagine if instead of paying this guy directly, I put the money in a smart contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we both agree that in case there is a dispute, this is going to be arbitrated by Kleros. So if everything goes right, so if I'm happy with the product, so I sign the transaction, he gets the money, I get my website, and everybody's happy. But if there is a dispute, so the money is going to stay locked into the smart contract, and Kleros is going to select a jury of experts who are going to analyze the evidence, and they are going to vote who is right about the dispute. So these guys know how to build a website, so they see the contract, they see the product, and so they can decide who is right. And depending on who they vote, so the money goes back to me, or the money is transferred to the developer. So that's basically how Kleros works. This is a very simple example, but Kleros is a protocol that can be used for arbitrating almost everything, like insurance, like finance, travel disputes, lots of different disputes that we have today could be arbitrated by Kleros, and this could solve lots of problems of the economy that we have now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like an awesome concept. And I know that there are issues like this out there that are prevalent throughout, especially, in different industries. But I mean, just speaking, I have a technology background myself. So, just speaking specifically in technology there, your example of the website, things like that come up all the time. I mean, my company deals with that on a daily basis, outside of, CryptoFizz and our blockchain. We deal with this with clients all the time. So that opens up a lot of questions for me there, and I'm sure some of our listeners a ton of questions that they have from that explanation there. So I guess to kind of start peeling back the layers a little bit. One of the questions that that came up to my mind was, when you talk about, going to dispute a website transaction that maybe it's like $500, do you have any vision of is there any limit on the size of transaction that Kleros should dispute? Is there a certain range that you're looking at, or is it pretty much anything?
So there is not a limit like in terms of money. So the limit that Kleros has today is so the kind of disputes that it can solve. It's like for now, this is very new technology, and it is based on game theory. So because of how the stage where we are, we think it can be used for like small claims, like I would say, where you have like only binary choices, right? The website was well done or not, and where there are only two parties involved, because many disputes, have like 3, 4, or 5 parties. So it would be Kleros. It would be hard for Kleros at this point of technology development to reach a decision in these more complex disputes. And also, since this is quite early stage technology, so you don't want at this moment to start putting disputes like involving like millions of dollars into a system that has not been properly tested, right? Mm-hmm. And we would be happy at this moment to start working on smaller claims like this website dispute, right? You don't have a solutions for this now. On small insurance claim, like a very small, I would say, car crash. So do you have to pay me or I have to pay you because of this car crash? Nobody got hurt, just some damages. So we think that the most value from Kleros will come from arbitrating disputes that today they are too expensive to go to court or to a different arbitration method. So that's where we are targeting now, and that's where blockchain can help you streamline the process and avoid a number of layers of complexity that existing systems have, and that they only add cost to the dispute resolution and don't add much value.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, especially in the smaller claims like that, larger claims, like you said, I mean, sometimes, larger claims are probably going to go through, some type of court procedure or something like that. But since the solution doesn't exist for these smaller type of claims, and that's definitely where, as you say, Kleros fits in there. So that's.
We get this question a lot. Like, are you going to replace lawyers? No, of course we're not going to replace lawyers. Like, AI is going to replace lawyers in the future. So Kleros actually is going to help lawyers and help court systems so to solve disputes where no lawyer is interested in going. Like, a lawyer is not going to spend his time like solving a $200 dispute, right? It's not worth it for him. So Kleros needs to solve those small disputes where nobody can solve now. So that's the bottom of the pyramid where we are targeting, not the lawyer stuff.
That's actually kind of funny that you said that, because one of the questions that, I've talked to, Billy and I have talked about a lot of ideas that we've had in the past with things that blockchain can do. And one of the things that I've brought up numerous times is, here in the US, for instance, maybe, this could be any country, but building out some type of platform that does voting, that takes over voting so that we don't have to go to the polls like we normally do. So one of the questions that, with what you just mentioned there that I was thinking around Kleros was, is the goal eventually to, maybe possibly have Kleros, come in and, or something like Kleros, no longer need small claims type of courts, out there, where it's small claims against people, that have to go to a court and have a judge, arbitrate it potentially. So it sounds like really for those small claims, that's probably somewhere where Kleros could fit in.
Yeah, small claims, but not so. I would say arbitration, right? Because Kleros is opt-in for both parties who participate in the dispute, right? And they have to opt in before the dispute arises. So that's the definition of arbitration, right? So we are doing arbitration like not 10x, but 100x more efficient, like faster and more transparent, right? Using crypto economic models instead of all methods that are inspired in like very old 18th century technology, right? So if this works as we expect it to work, if the game theory works as we expect it, so yeah, it's going to drive down the cost of arbitration like a lot. And this is going to help lots of people like everywhere.
When you say that the time frame for resolution, I saw in your white paper there's an example of 3 days, but is that generally the time frame, or what do you envision as the time frame for resolution for these type of disputes?
No, so the time frame is going to be selected at the court level. So some of them are going to have very low time frames. Like maybe some of them are like 5 hours or like 6 hours or something like that. Others will take weeks. That's not defined at the level of Kleros. It's defined by the users who are going to vote in the platform to create a court for solving X dispute, and they are going to decide that this kind of dispute is going to have these rules for solving it, and among these rules, there's going to be a session time that's going to be like whatever they choose to be appropriate for that type of dispute.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into another question that I had there. So the explanation is that this is all going to be programmed into the smart contract prior to this happening. So excuse me. So that's going to be the time frame, like you just mentioned there, along with maybe the number of arbitrators, maybe some other options there that are going to be programmed in the contract. Well, with a lot of end users that are going to be using this that maybe aren't developers, what is going to be the process of creating this? Is there going to be, are you going to go to Kleros and fill out some different information about the contract and that's how it's created, or how does that process work?
You know what? So like the parties in the dispute, I guess in most cases they won't even know that they are using Kleros. Like imagine you and I like do a kind of a transaction. So the website development thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I hire you to do the website, and I didn't like what you did. So first I hired you in a like freelancing platform, right? Mm-hmm. So and when I agree with you on the terms and conditions, imagine a decentralized freelancing platform. So we agree on terms and conditions, and then before like logging out, we select. So we have a list of arbitrators. So the platform asks, okay, in case a dispute arises in your contract, who do you want to have as arbitrator? So and we press there, we click, and there is like a drop-down menu that says, okay, Kleros is one of them. But then we have like other one or like right. So a drop-down menu of possible options, and we choose one. Or we may not like even know which one we are choosing, like because the platform could have like as a default arbitrator Kleros. So you and I just see the platform, the interface of the platform, and if there is a dispute, we just press the button send to arbitration, and then like the next day we receive a decision. You get an email, hey Justin, you have lost your dispute against Federico, so you have lost your ETH that was in the escrow, and so now, because the jury voted against you, and you don't even know that Kleros was in the back end of all this process. You just saw that you had a dispute and you lost it on this platform, right? The people who do know that they are using Kleros are the jurors, because they are experts and they activate the token, and they do the juror work. Yeah, they know they are using Kleros, but the end user, you and I, the guys who do the website development and the customer, so they don't even know what they are using.
So if I were to build a freelance platform, just as an example there, and I wanted to utilize Kleros as the arbitration process in it, is Kleros going to be, is it going to be something like where Kleros can easily be integrated via the API or something like that? Is that, how it's going to work?
That's correct. So, because that's what actually is happening. So you see all these companies from the decentralized ecosystem building the e-commerce platform, freelancing platform, music platform, and they all see that they are going to have disputes between users. So most of them were actually starting to build like in-house arbitration system. But you know what? If you're building an e-commerce platform like OpenBazaar, so you don't want to worry about arbitration, because you have to put all your effort and all your like brains and money into trying to build a very good platform and trying to bring users to use it. And so why don't you just delegate arbitration? It's not something that you can like develop as a side project. So you just use a smart contract standard that we develop, and in your platform, like every dispute happening in your platform is going to be sent to Kleros, and Kleros will send you back the decision. And you don't have to worry at all about the arbitration because we handle that, and we are experts in that, right? We that's what we do, and so we have to do that very well for our project to succeed. We take very good care of this working in a fast, efficient, and transparent way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, being able to easily plug into existing platforms, be it blockchain or non-blockchain solutions, is I think definitely key there. So that's awesome. Along the lines of the arbitrators there, so kind of a few questions surrounding with that. So when the arbitration process occurs, is the majority simply considered 51%, or is it, does it have to reach a certain metric there?
So no, it's not 51%. So the boundaries are about 25 and 75. Like if you vote outside of those numbers of the median, so you are considered incoherent. This is a very good question you ask, because like imagine you have a jury of like 11 people, right? Okay. And you get like 10 voting A and 1 voting B. So that in that case, that it's quite clear maybe that the guy who voted differently in this website dispute, for example, like he probably did not take a look at the evidence, right? He may just like receive the evidence and then voted like anything, like randomly just to collect the money, right? But so in this case, you can like punish this guy by making him lose the token he's taken to be juror. But this case is quite clear because it's a big jury. So, but what happens if you have like a 3 people jury? So, and you have 2 voting A and 1 voting B. So now, it's harder to like make a decision because if one of the jurors may change their mind, so the dispute could go to a different decision, right? So these are the type of cases that we are starting to, so that we want to analyze better and see exactly how to solve these disputes, right? Because in the end, what do we want? We want disputes to be solved correctly by the lowest number of jurors, because if you have less jurors, so the cost is low, right? If you have to solve it with 51 jurors, it's going to be more expensive. So we have a member of the team, William, who is a crypto economic researcher, and he's studying. So he's starting to study this type of problems, and a lot of this we're going to learn when we actually start to put this into work. Because for now there's a white paper, there's code, but there is no like real use cases. We have not started with the pilot yet. So we will start with the pilots in a couple of months, and we are going to do a lot of learning with real use cases and real behavior of jurors, and that's going to help us like answer your question.
Yeah, no, totally. When developing a new technology, I don't think anybody can expect to have every single answer fully fleshed out. So yeah, the testing phase of this, definitely will come into play there. Totally understand that. When the arbitration occurs, and I believe you may have mentioned this in your frequently asked questions, but just for our listeners there, when the arbitration occurs, and as you mentioned there, depending on the amount of arbitrators that you have, is how much this actually costs. So how does the cost actually work? Does the losing party pay it? Does it come out of the dispute amount? Like, how does that payment occur?
Yeah, there may be different ways for the parties to split the cost. And this, in the end, will depend on the agreement that parties make before the dispute happens. I would expect that in most cases, so the losing party is going to pay for the dispute that it lost, right? So pay for the jurors. So how does it work? So you and I did this agreement for the website, and now there is a dispute, and now when we did the agreement, we both agreed that if there was a dispute, we should pay for the dispute because that's the rules. So now you and I have to put some extra money into the smart contract, and we both have to put enough money to cover for the juror's work, right? So if juror's work is going to cost 100, I put 100, you put 100. The jurors make their work, and so they vote. And so if I lose, so you are going to be reimbursed your 100, and I'm going to lose the 100 that's going to be distributed to the jurors who did the work of arbitration. So in this case, what happened? I lost the dispute, so I lost the initial amount of money, right? And then I also lost the money I put to start the arbitration process.
That makes sense. So it's like almost like there's going to be a dispute escrow in a way that's set aside for this.
Yeah. So that escrow controls the money that is going to give us the enforcement of the agreement. If you don't have the money controlled by the smart contract, so you don't have enforcement.
Okay, that makes sense. Going back to the arbitrators, because there's actually one of the questions I had surrounding that. When the arbitrators, so the one that is, you said, the incoherent arbitrator, basically they will lose some of their token, and their token is, it's PNK, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So if they lose that, their loss then gets converted over to the arbitrators that were coherent or jurors that were coherent. Is that correct? Is that correct in my understanding?
That's correct. So jurors who vote incoherently, they lose the pinakion, the PNK, that they had deposited to be drawn as jurors, and this is split among those who voted coherently.
That's awesome. So, and mentioned in your, actually the first time that I came across this myself, but basically that came from the book, The Strategy of Conflict, which is the Schelling point, correct?
That's correct. Yes, that's a Thomas Schelling book, 1960s. He wrote it. It's a great book about game theory, so I would recommend it to everyone in the audience who wants to learn about this.
Amazing. It's amazing. It's funny how concepts like that from the 60s there are now coming into play with new technology like blockchain today.
Yeah, all the blockchain, like 50% of blockchain is game theory, and the other half is cryptography, I guess.
So how are the jurors selected? And I understand, I'm not necessarily referring to the amount of Pinocchian that they put forward, but I mean more so along their skills. So let's say that I wanted to potentially be a juror. I have a background in database development, web design, some programming, Python, JavaScript. But how do I prove that to Kleros that I actually have that knowledge so that I can be an actual juror?
So that's a very good question. And so Kleros is not going to ask for you to prove that you have expertise in database or in website development. Kleros is going to solve this problem of you having the right skills for the dispute, so in a very different way. And this way is going to be solved by crypto economics. So you have this knowledge in web development, right?
Yes.
So you need to buy the token, and you're going to deposit the token into a course on web development, right? So you self-select into the course where you want to work. Now, why would you want to work in this course? Oh, because there is an arbitration fee that you're going to be paid for your work as arbitrator. So you're going to deposit the token there, and imagine you have 3,000 people who deposit the token into this court. So each token you deposit gives you the right to be drawn as a juror in a dispute in website development. So then there is a random selection mechanism that's going to pick 7 of these guys who deposited the token, and these 7 guys are going to have the right to see the evidence, see the website, see the contract, and vote on who is right about this dispute. So, and this is when, so each of them vote, and then the guy who are incoherent, like if you have 6 that vote A and 1 that votes B, so the guy who votes differently from the others is going to lose his token. So, and why does this create the right incentive? Because so if you don't know anything about web design or web development, and you just say, hey, I know about this, and I will put my token to be a juror here, so then you are going to have a problem. So the other 6 guys, they do know about this, so they are likely to vote coherently. So now it's going to take you a lot of time to see the evidence and to analyze it and try to vote coherently, or you're going just to make a bad call and you're going to vote different from the others many times, and so you're going to start losing money. Okay, you may win one of them because you may be lucky, because you voted randomly and it happened that you voted with the majority, but if you play this game many times, on average, you will be expected to lose money, right?
Yeah.
So in the end, you are going to stop with this behavior because you're going to see that it's going to hurt your financial interest. And so Kleros can produce the right decisions without even asking you about your expertise, just because it will make you behave in a way that makes you select yourself into the right course and vote honestly. So that's a good example on how good crypto economics can solve a old problem in a completely different way.
That's kind of, if I'm not mistaken, that's the point of the Schelling point there. Is that correct?
That's correct. So Thomas Schelling developed the concept of focal points, and so it's about everything in game theory. It's like how people make decisions when they have some restrictions of information and they have different incentives schemes. So he did this research in the 1960s, I think it was, that he asked different students from New York, right? So imagine, I tell you that you have to meet a guy in New York tomorrow, at some point of New York, at some time in New York, but I'm not going to tell you where exactly, nor the exact time. And I'm going to tell the other guy, the same thing, and I'm going to tell you both that if you get to meet tomorrow, so each of you will make $100, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can't communicate, right? This was before cell phones.
Okay.
So
And Google
where would
Maps,
you go?
right?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. Where would you go, under this payoff scheme and under these information restrictions?
I don't want to answer this because I actually believe that I read this on your site. So, because I believe the answer was it was noon at the
it was noon at the information booth at the Grand Central Station.
That's what it was. Yep.
So why would people choose that, right? So they both had this information, so the same instructions. Any point in New York was good enough. Why didn't they go I don't know, to Hell's Kitchen or to Greenwich Village or to Battery Park? So all of them were good enough for comply with the solution. And why would they go at noon? Why don't they go at 11:47 p.m.? So there is no specific reason, right? Because from the point of view of the payoff, it was the same. But each of the people who got these instructions were trying to think, okay, what is the other one going to think that I'm going to think, that he's going to think, right? Mm-hmm. So you have this recursive process that for some cultural reason, people tend to coordinate into Grand Central Station. New Yorkers tend to coordinate at noon in Grand Central Station. So that's the Schelling point in this case. And you have these jurors, approximately the same skills, and they have access to the same evidence. And so, and they know that if they vote different from the others, they're going to lose money. So under this incentive scheme, And given that they cannot communicate with each other, how would they coordinate? So I am a juror in this website dispute, and I have to think, okay, if I don't want to lose money, I need to know how the others are going to vote. But since I cannot communicate, so what would I think that the other is going to think that I'm going to do? So the only way in which we can coordinate is, okay, I'm going just to see the evidence and vote what I think is right because I think that the others are going to do this, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how the actions of these people coordinate to solve the dispute in a fair and honest way through the concept of Schelling point.
And so obviously the disputers do not see the arbitrators at all. I'm assuming also the arbitrators don't even see who the other arbitrators are, because then that would kind of remove that whole Schelling point example. They could just vote with the majority at that point, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
They vote independently.
Okay, totally makes sense. So those were some of the main questions that I had. I have a few other here that I want to kind of, close us out with, but before I, get into some of these other questions, basically talking a little bit about your upcoming, ICO and the, what the roadmap looks like. Are there any kind of details that we left out there that you'd like the listeners to know about Kleros that, we didn't touch on?
I think we talked about most things. So the thing that's important to know is that Kleros is a multi-purpose course. It can be used for anything, disputes in energy, disputes in finance, disputes in whatever. And all of the decentralized platforms that people are building now, they could use Kleros for arbitration, right? And this is the beginning of a new ecosystem that proposes solutions to disputes in a very different way to what existed before. And so very excited about the upcoming token sale because, as I was telling you, all the system depends on this token that is going to make the jurors vote in an honest way. So that's the goal of doing the token sale.
And the main token that we're talking about here, because I know some projects out there are a few that have dual tokens or two tokens. So it's the Kleros token. The main token is going to PNK, Pinekion, if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
The name comes from the token that the ancient Athenians, the ancient Greeks used for selecting jurors in their popular trials. This is so all the Kleros system is loosely inspired in how the ancient Greek trials worked. Like people could select as a juror with a token, and there was a random selection machine called Kleroterion. Kleros means randomness in Greek, and Terion is the name of the machine. It was the random machine. It was the altar of, it means altar. So Kleroterion was the altar of luck. So that's the place where you went to be selected as juror, and it was a complex allotment mechanism to make sure that jurors were selected in a transparent way and nobody could tamper with that. In the same way, Kleros relies on randomness for having the jurors being selected in a transparent way and nobody can tamper with the jury selection mechanism.
I love learning how various blockchain projects come up with their names. So that's a very cool backstory there on the token there. That's cool. Was this actually? I didn't watch so you did a TED talk as well, and I watched a portion of it. But to be honest, I don't speak Spanish. So,
yeah, there is one with subtitles, so you can see that one.
I'll have to check that out, and we'll actually link that below in the podcast here so that everybody else can check that out there. But from the portion that I did listen to, the little bit that I did, this has been something that you've been thinking about for a while, even prior to Kleros. So you did something with crowd jury as well, and I mean you've done all kinds of stuff. I should have probably gone over this at the beginning of the podcast, but you studied economics and philosophy from University of Buenos Aires. You were a journalist for Clarin.com, which after a little bit of research that I did, I realized is the largest newspaper in Argentina.
One of the largest in Latin America, actually.
That's amazing. So you have a doctorate in business, did TEDx, and it looks like you're kind of a serial entrepreneur in a way where you are great at building businesses and getting them up and running. So So, kind of like along those lines there, like take a step back a little bit from Kleros and what you all are doing. Like, what do you as a CEO do right now? Like, what is the main thing that, like, your main role in the business? Are you more of like me? I'm a hands-on person. So if I were to run an organization, I'd want to do, I'd feel like I'd have to be in the weeds programming and stuff, but that's probably not the right way to go. Are you like that, or are you more of a, keep the trains running to the station and make sure everything's kind of moving on time? What's your day-to-day life like?
No, so being a CEO in a startup is a bit like, so it's a bit of hands-on things, right? Because there is not lots of people, like you cannot delegate. Like this is not a IBM. Like you have like 20 people to whom you can like delegate stuff. But no, I think the most important thing is like for a CEO is like lots of, so of course the team building part. So trying to get the right people to the team, and so have them work in harmony, setting the vision about what do we want to accomplish. And one of the important things that I am doing now, and that's something that every startup CEO should do, is like customer discovery. So who does need this? Who needs Kleros, right? What pain point, what problem are we trying to address with this technology? So what I see, as you told before, so as we were saying, I did like different things before, and I have been thinking about the problem of arbitration for a long time. That's the crowd jury concept comes from, like, what was that? It came, and I started like talking and thinking about this before people like knew what an ICO was, or before like Ethereum was launched. So I started doing my research because I was very interested. I really cared about the problem, because being from an emerging economy, I saw that there was a lot of people that could not have access to justice, right? So I wanted to solve this problem, and then I saw, okay, what's the technology that can solve this problem? And it turned out that this technology was blockchain, because it can streamline processes. Smart contracts give you enforcement, and so you can like do arbitration that's much cheaper than any other existing method. And I try to keep like the eye on the ball at all time. So what are we trying to solve here? Because it's very easy for you in this space, especially, to like lose focus on the problem, because you get distracted with the token sale and all the stuff that goes around in crypto. But all the time I try to remember as a CEO, so okay, what is exactly the problem we are trying to solve? And so blockchain is just the way to solve it. But every decision I make, so is this decision helping me move forward to solution of this problem? This means, is this going to help us build arbitration like cheaper, more transparent, and faster than existing method? If it's not going to help us do that, so then should not worry about it.
That's a hard thing that a lot of entrepreneurs can keep focus on, because I know, even myself, and, when you think of ideas and you start building out a product, sometimes you get in the weeds of the features and additional features and other things that it needs to do. So keeping focus on the problem, as the CEO's role, and keeping the team moving forward to that totally makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Use one of the worst things that you can do as an entrepreneur in a startup is like over optimize things at the beginning, because you don't really know what the customer is going to actually need, right? There is one truth: we have not tested this with actual users now, because like this is very new. We are building this, so a lot of the things that so just making assumptions and building on those assumptions before testing a lot of the things that we are assuming, because that's how you start building something that nobody wants. So a lot of this, you have to keep very close to the customer. And another thing I did before doing this, so I was a professor on Lean Startup, right? So I have all this method to understand what the customer needs. That's a different story, but so always keep in mind that you need to solve the problem of the customer, and if you're not doing that, then you're building something that nobody will want in the future.
If there was one book that you had to recommend to people out there to read when it comes to either being a startup or just anything in the business world or blockchain or whatever, what book is there a book that you would suggest?
So I always recommend this book for entrepreneurs. That's Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. Peter Thiel was a founder of PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a book that's about startups, but it's also a book about the world and about innovation and about life and about everything. So if you want to build something, I would recommend reading that book. That's quite short, so you can read in 2 days, and it will teach you a lot more than just building a startup. Very, very, very good book. 0 to 1.
0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. So we will link that below the podcast as well. So kind of last questions. That's awesome. I'm going to check that out myself and read it. Now I'll shoot you an email and let you know what I think after I have. To kind of close this out. Can you tell me we've talked about this a little bit and you've mentioned this in the podcast, but where and I hate asking this loaded question because me as an engineer myself, I know we don't like to answer necessarily date questions because things can always happen with a product. Dates can be moved forward, pushed back, whatever. So I don't want to ask a specific date type question, but where is Kleros out at right now in its roadmap, and what's the roadmap? I don't want, you don't need to put out the long-term roadmap, but what's the roadmap look like here for the next, couple months to maybe even a year?
Yeah, sure. So now, as you know, we're starting our token sale. These tokens are going to be used by jurors to be selected as jurors. So it's a very important part of the platform. So after these tokens are distributed, so we're starting to do the first pilots in about July. So that's when the token sale ends. And then we already have a proof of concept, and we're going to be on the mainnet in July. And at that moment, we're starting to do pilots with some of the partners that we have with Ink Protocol and Dither. So these are two blockchain companies. So the next step is ending the proof of concept and putting it on the mainnet in a couple of months, and then starting to do pilots and start testing and iterating the platform to make it better.
That's actually one question I didn't ask, and I don't know if I missed this or not, but is this ERC20?
It's Ethereum, it's okay. Standard ERC20 token,
okay.
Ethereum.
Okay, makes sense. And then kind of the last question before we close it out here is, can you give us what is the time frame for the ICO? What are the dates? How many tokens? All that jazz.
Yeah, sure. So the ICO starts in May 15th. The total amount of tokens is 1 billion, but we are going to do this in a number of rounds instead of selling all the tokens at the beginning of the project. So we think it's more transparent to start by selling a smaller amount. It's going to be 16%, 1/6, and so. After we go through and we can prove that our platform works and that people can use it and that we reach milestones, we're going to start selling more tokens after the milestones, right? So we think it's more transparent in that way when we can show the users and the community what we are delivering than just doing a big sale at the beginning. And we're going to use a new method for token sales that's called interactive coin offering that was suggested by Vitalik Buterin. This method seeks to give small buyers more opportunity to participate in the token sale, because now what happens in many sales is everything gets sold in the beginning and it's bought by big buyers, and the small guy cannot participate. So we're going to use this method that you can check in our website how it works, and we are going to be the first probably to do it this way. So very excited about what's coming and hope to see you all in the token side.
Hope you all enjoyed our discussion and now have a further understanding of what Kleros is all about and the problems that they're trying to solve. I really enjoyed the interview myself, and I want to thank Frederico so much for allowing us to interview him. Make sure that you all check out their interactive ICO, which will be starting on May 15th. You can check it out at kleros.io. That's KLEROS.io. And thanks for listening. Have a good one, everybody.